Well, Anna, over to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's really a massive pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about my research. But also, a massive portion of this talk is about how patients such as yourselves with meningiomas helped shape the research. So, what I'm going to do today in my talk is I'm going to give a brief overview of the beginning, all the patient and public involvement that we did and what we gained from it at the very beginning of the study, and how we changed our study protocol based on the feedback from patients such as yourselves. And then I'll just take you briefly through my results. So I will be giving some sort of disclaimers in the sense of this is very specific for patients that had brain radiosurgery, so not standard radiotherapy, but I'll go through everything in detail. And if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy for you to ask them either in the middle of the presentation or at the very end, whatever is easiest for you. Now I'm going to try and share my screen. It worked before, but that doesn't mean that's going to work again. So apologies for that. Give me a second. So, like I said, I'm going to talk to you today about the cognitive decline after brain radiosurgery study, or CoDe-B-Rad, as Ella mentioned for short. And I'm going to focus particularly on the outcomes for meningioma patients after brain radiosurgery, or SRS. But if we take things one step at a time, so just to introduce myself a little bit more, who am I? I'm a clinical scientist or a medical physicist. Medical physicist is the old term that we use. We are registered healthcare professionals with the HCPC, much like nurses and midwives. We're highly trained, and our job revolves around the safety of your radiotherapy treatments. So the safety when it comes to planning the treatment, checking the treatment, and doing the quality assurance before every single patient starts the treatment. I have put on a little link here of a short video if you want, where I explain in a little bit more detail what our role is within a radiotherapy treatment journey in general, for you to have a look at another time. And my research, which I normally work, as I mentioned, at Nottingham University Hospitals NHS Trust, and I'm doing my PhD, my research with the University of Nottingham. And my research focused on cognitive decline after brain radiosurgery, and are there any short-term or long-term side effects after treatment? And also, if patients' quality of life is impacted upon due to the treatment. So again, a brief overview. You might all already know this, but I'm just going to go through it again. What is cognition? What do we mean by cognitive decline? So cognition is the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. And research has already shown that cognition can be affected by radiation, and radiation can have short and long-term side effects for patients. So we want to study this in a little bit more detail. And what is stereotactic radiosurgery, or SRS as we call it for short? Is a non-invasive treatment. You can have it either in one or up to 5 outpatients appointments, and it can be delivered with different platforms. So some of you might have heard about Gamma Knife, some of you might have heard about CyberKnife, and some of you might have heard of a linear accelerator or a LINAC. And this is the image of a LINAC that I'm showing here in the Lego version, that you can see here in the picture. So what was your involvement? Basically, I really believe that getting the views of patients at the very beginning of every research project is really, really important, because we don't want to go off and do research that might not be applicable to you, of interest to the patient, and might not meet your needs. So in order for us to meet your needs better, we need to speak with you, and we need to involve you at every possible stage of the research journey. So the first step was to try and understand the impact that brain radiotherapy has and had for patients and their carers. Because at that point, when I started the PhD, I had not identified that I was going to focus neither on stereotactic radiosurgery nor on which patient population. So I had open discussions, kind of reached out to a lot of charities, and one of them was Brainstrust. So I had open discussions with a total of 5 patients, and I sent out questionnaires for patients and carers. And I attended different support groups, basically trying to discuss with patients and their carers what symptoms they were having after radiotherapy and what was those symptoms' impact on their lives. So you kind of getting feedback from yourselves. I identified some focus areas for the research, whereby you mentioned that your cognition was impaired. You didn't really have very good information as patients from your clinicians. You wanted us to potentially look at improving your quality of life because it was impacted quite a lot. Some of you thought that you had like mental confusion, and in general, you wanted us to look at improving or potentially reducing, if we can, any side effects from radiotherapy. So I took all of that and I went and I discussed it with other clinical stakeholders. So we decided where was the research gap with all of that to try and match up what you wanted to do with what also had not been done in the past. And we identified the patient population and also the fact that it was actually patients that have stereotactic radiosurgery where their cognition and the impact to their lives and the quality of lives has not been studied in that much detail. So we'd said we focused the study towards those patients. So what we did is then I sent out another round of questionnaires specific for patients that had stereotactic radiosurgery. And I wanted to identify again what were the symptoms that they have been experiencing, what was their impact in the quality of lives, and also for them to advise us based on that, what would they like us to do in terms of testing, what the format would be. They identify that quality of life questionnaires should have been included because quality of life was a really big thing for everybody. And we asked questions about like how long should we be doing the testing for? How often should we be doing it? What are the options? How should we offer it to patients? Where should they be coming for their, or where should we be going for their testing? Because basically, I don't know if you can see this really well, but this is what we were trying to avoid. We were trying to avoid duplication. We didn't want to burden patients with loads of forms and just making the research difficult. We wanted it to be as little of a burden as possible for yourselves. These are all the contributions that you guys made. So on this side, I've mentioned all the things that you kind of requested, and this is how we responded. So this is a very busy slide, so I'm going to talk you through it. So for example, you asked us to focus on the side effects and trying to minimize them. So what we did is we focused the study on cognitive decline, physical and mental symptoms, and not just measuring them, but also trying to map them across the brain so that for future patients, if we identified an area that was when irradiated would cause a certain symptom, then we can say for future patients, you know what, we cannot really irradiate this area because we're going to cause this particular symptom for this patient, so we can try and avoid it. And then you also mentioned the quality of life, your quality of life can be affected quite badly. So what we did is that we included 2 quality of life questionnaires with functional and emotional scales so that we can get a better understanding of the impact of the treatment for you. And one more thing that you advised was that you didn't want the testing to last more than 30 minutes. So actually what we did was we ignored all the national guidance about what tests we should do and went with your suggestions. And we identified cognitive tests and quality of life questionnaires that could be completed within that 30-minute time slot. And I can tell you, after having completed the study, I was really happy that we decided to ignore the national guidelines and go with your advice, because the patients really could not tolerate more than 30 minutes. So, had we gone with the national guidelines, we would not have been able to actually fit all the questions in within those 30 minutes. And I don't think we would have been able to get any more information than what we already have. And the other thing that you asked us to do is to offer flexibility and to try and minimize the burden for the patients. So, what we did is we tried to do exactly that. We offered all the options with regards to the test, to do it online, to do it on paper, for the patient to either come in the hospital and do the testing if they had another appointment, for me to travel to their homes and do it at their own in their own environment at a time and date that is convenient for them, and also to try and coincide the clinical appointments with the follow-ups that we were doing. So we tried and we did manage to achieve that. So also, with regards to the patient-facing materials, I had three patient and public involvement contributors from Brains Trust that they reviewed the plain English summary for our ethics application, as well as the patient information leaflet. And all the comments that they made were implemented in the final versions that we gave to the patients. We are really, really grateful, because we think that their contributions made our information leaflets better. The readability was much better, and the understanding that patients gained from that was a lot better. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for your contributions, for taking the time, because it has been a brilliant journey for me, for the rest of the research team, to involve patients in this process, and it has really been worth it. It has really paid off, and I hope it will pay off for you as well, whereby we have some results from the research that would potentially make your lives or the lives of future patients sort of better, whether that is with making improvements, or even if it is just better informing patients. So with that, I'm going to go on and carry on talking about my results. Can you still hear and see me all okay? If somebody can,
Yes.
yeah,
We can
excellent.
hear and see you, Anna.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, very briefly, with regards to my results, so we recruited a total of 90 patients for the study. However, the meningioma patients that we focused on were 30. And with the meningioma patients, because all of you have got very long life expectancies, we focused more on the long-term side effects from the treatment, potential side effects from the treatment. And that meant that what we did was we tested patients that had at least that had treatment more than a year ago. So at least a year had passed between when we did the testing and when they had their stereotactic radiosurgery. And what we found was that the patients were cognitively impaired. Nearly 70% of the patients were cognitively impaired and more than a year post SRS. And the other 30% fell in the normal category. And what we also did was we asked the patients to complete the quality of life questionnaires twice. And once was to tell us how they felt at the time of the testing. And another time was to ask them how they felt at the time before they had the treatment. Now, this is really tricky because we don't have what we in research lingo call prospective data. And what prospective data means is that we have the information and we've done the same test before you have your treatment as well as after you have your treatment. Now, because I couldn't have done this within the time frame of a PhD, I only have the after data, so I tested patients after, which means that there is a limitation there with regards to, yes, like I said, the patients that we tested were impaired, but I don't know if that was caused necessarily from the treatment. Was it the disease? Some of the patients were having surgery before. So, what was causing all of that? I could not really disentangle and could not really tell the difference. And the same thing goes for quality of life, which is why I asked the patients to answer the questionnaires twice. So I asked them to tell me how they felt at the time of the testing, but also how they remember they felt at the time before they had the treatment. And for about 30% of them, they told me that they had a worse quality of life after the treatment. And what we saw was there was a significant worsening in social functioning. So patients were not being as sociable as they were before. They were more tired. Sometimes they had more pain. They had a bit more hair loss and they were a bit more drowsy. But future uncertainty definitely improved significantly after treatment. Now, when we did the statistical analysis to try and identify different areas in the brain where these sort of symptoms can occur, we found out different areas that can affect language. So, all these little red spots. So, for those of you that have never seen MRI scans before, these are images of the brain if you cut it up in slices in this way. The middle ones are if you cut it up in slices sort of this way, you can see a little bit of the eye here. And then this image is if you cut the brain up in slices, sort of kind of going in that direction. So this is what we identified. So at the bottom right hand side of the brain, kind of towards the back of here, we identified that this area can affect the language. So people were having some issues with speaking or identifying words and repeating sentences. And again, a little bit higher up, this area we identified that was causing patients to have issues with controlling their bladder. So the positive change and the impact that you have made, and hopefully the research has made, is that we can better inform future patients about side effects, potential side effects from the treatment. We can try and optimize our radiotherapy treatments, and we can try and reduce these side effects for any future patients. Again, it's very important to try and remember that we're still not really sure whether it's actually the treatment that is causing this, because as part of my writing up my PhD, I identified other pieces of research, for example, for patients that only had surgery with the meningiomas, and the surgeons sort of did a study that was similar to mine, where they looked at patients' quality of life and the patient's cognition, and they tested it before they had the surgery and after they had the surgery. And they identify that actually the surgery does not impact patients' cognition at all, but that the patients are already impaired before they come to them. So it's the disease that can cause that. However, for future work, this is one of the things that we could look at. We could ideally look at doing a multi-center study and get patients from different sites across England. And it would be ideal to try and follow up patients from the beginning when they get diagnosed. A lot of you get diagnosed and you have annual scans for quite a few years before your meningiomas grow and people decide to do something about them. So it would be brilliant if we could actually follow you all up during that time, so we can identify, is it something that is the impairment happens at that time? Is it something that happens gradually? Is it the treatments? What is happening there? So that we can let you know whether it's a disease, the surgery, the radiotherapy that affects you, so that you can be better informed, you know what to expect, and also you've got a better understanding of what to expect, what help to ask for later on, as the disease progresses, and what support is there for you available. So I think this is it. We do try and fight this fight together, whether that is through my clinical work or whether that is through my research. And this is why your involvement is so important for us, because without your help, without your guidance, we cannot do the right thing so that we can help you and future patients. Thank you.